I think it's good that mental illness is getting more, that people are having more awareness around mental illness. But I think a lot of the times people feel like maybe their mental illness is something that they're a victim of and that can't be changed, or that they need something else outside of them to fix it for them. It's not so much that we need something to fix it or that it's something that can't be fixed or that we're a victim of. It's just something that we can learn to grow through and learn from. My name is Emmy Huddleston. I'm 27. When I was in 4th grade, I was diagnosed with OCD and ADD, but over time it kind of manifested in different ways. So at one point I was diagnosed also with like general anxiety disorder, but just anxiety for the most part in all its different ways that it shows up. I would spend like 3 to 4 hours a night on homework in like 3rd and 4th grade, and none of the other kids were doing that. I think I realized that like something like am I not as smart, or what's going on, and I think they realized that too, that there was just something up, because I had good grades and I just wanted everything to be perfect. I felt like everybody else kind of seemed like they weren't as worried as I was, and I didn't really know what I was worried about, other than I was actually really afraid of getting sick. I was like super duper afraid of vomiting, so like everything I could do, like wash my hands like crazy till they like cracked and bled. At a certain point, I started playing what I used to call like brain games, which was like, if I touch this poster as I'm walking down the hallway, then I won't get sick, or nothing bad will happen to me. And I think at one point I asked a friend, like, oh, do you ever do this? And they're like, no. And I was like, okay, maybe that's just like a weird thing that I do. But then when my parents took me to get like checked out, they were like, oh yeah, no, that's not something that is healthy. So I actually went on medication starting in 4th grade, and I went on Zoloft, and then they also gave me Adderall, and I was on those for about 10 years. Well, actually, so my dad is a doctor, so like medication was like a really normal thing in our household. It was like always this for that, like one quick fix for anything really. And so I wanted the medication. I was like, oh, this will help me like not be so stressed about homework so much that like I'm going to bed at 2 a.m. And so I was down for it. Like I really wanted it. When I first got on medication, I honestly couldn't tell any difference. It was about like 2 months before I really started to like recognize that like, oh, this is getting a little easier. I'm not like constantly in my head quite as much. But as far as side effects, I never noticed any side effects until I was about 18. My boyfriend at the time had never been on medication in his household. Like they didn't really like ever take medications. And I was kind of talking about them with pride. I was like, yeah, I'm like on all these medications for this and that. And he was like, oh, like, have you ever read about the side effects of them? I was like, no, like, why would I need to? There's like, no company would make something that could hurt me. Like, I wouldn't need to, but I finally like looked into them because I was like, oh, I never even thought about that. Like, that's interesting. And so I looked it up and I found that there were a lot of side effects that I had experienced and not realized it, like the disassociation. Like I felt like I was in a bubble and I couldn't connect with anything that was going on outside of me about like this far. It was a very strange feeling. And I don't know how to describe it other than I just felt like there was like a film like surrounding me and I just couldn't like break it, but I could hear everything, see everything. I just felt like I couldn't connect to anything. One of the things I read was like a change in personality, and that really scared me because I was like, what if I've been taking something my whole life since I was a kid, and like I don't know if this is who I am naturally. And I think that really struck a chord. And then also there were no long-term studies. Like, I was the long-term study at that point because I started it not too long after the medication came out. Once I kind of looked into the side effects and realized I was kind of the long-term study and it wasn't working for me, was when it's like, you know what, I think I'm gonna take myself off of these. They're not working anymore. And I'm trying to figure out who I am. I'm 18 and like, I don't want something to change that. So after that, the first thought I had was just to go to therapy. I'd been to therapy before and I was like, okay, like I know that helped me when I was little, a little bit. And so I'll go back to doing that. And that helped some, but I would kind of just cycle back into old patterns. But I had kind of just stopped doing all the things that made me feel like joy and the things I really desired to do. Eventually, I was like, you know what I used to do a lot as a kid that helped was journaling, and got into journaling quite a bit. But one day I remember looking through the computer because I was like, I have to figure something out, because if I don't, like, I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing and I don't feel happy. So I got on my computer, and then as I was researching, there's this little like PDF that popped up, and it said valerian, passion flower, and skullcap, and I was like, what is that? And then I clicked on it, and I realized that they were plants, and I was like, oh my God, like plants are medicinal, like you can take plants as medicine, and I've always loved being outside and being around plants ever since I was a kid. And a light bulb kind of just went off, and I was like, I want to figure that out. Like, I didn't know at the time what I wanted to do as far as like a career, but I knew I wanted to do something in medicine. When I started looking for answers outside of pharmaceuticals, I think my parents thought I was kind of crazy. And they definitely didn't think it would be something that worked. I got really interested in it, like very quickly after finding out that plants offered something medicinal. And I actually went to school for herbal medicine the following year. They made jokes about like, oh, Emmy's going to Hogwarts and like, you know, you're a witch or whatever. But I learned so much about the body and how mental difficulties can arise out of like physical sickness and like allergies to food or sensitivities to things that you're putting in your body or around all the time, and how that can manifest in the mind. And I started taking herbal medicines, and then eventually learned about flower essences. Those, interestingly enough, were something that were the most like powerful for me personally. And maybe that's because I'm a relatively like sensitive person physically when it comes to like energies. Like I feel like a lot of the times I am able to feel the way that other people feel when I'm around them. And so naturally an energy medicine from a plant was something that worked really well. And I started using those, and that kind of helped me get back to myself a little bit more than a lot of other things, as far as like understanding why I might be afraid of something or why I might feel anxious about something else, and just starting to find answers within myself rather than needing something to fix something that was going on inside of me. So when my anxiety started getting worse, it affected me largely just by like I didn't want to go do anything at all really, other than just like go to work and come home and spend time with my partner. And I put all of my energy into my relationship, because at the time when my symptoms got really bad, when I was a little older, I was so obsessed over the possible failure of my relationship that nothing else in my life was I wasn't growing anywhere. So I was just working, coming home, like, and then thinking about like, oh, I've got to make dinner because if I don't make dinner, he's going to be mad. And my partner all the while is like really supportive, and I'm just obsessing. With obsessive compulsive disorder, a lot of the times, like, it manifests in a way where you start to really obsess over something, and kind of get something in your head about like something not being right, or just really obsessing about one subject. So I didn't realize it was anxiety. And I think that's when it was at its worst, is because I didn't realize how anxious I was. But I kind of just stopped doing all the things that made me feel like joy and the things I really desired to do. I think one thing that continually I have to kind of work through that keeps me from healing is just the belief that there's like a right way to do things. Because I tend to have a difficult time with the word should and having ideas of like what the right way to do things are, or kind of seeking perfection. I think specifically social media can be really triggering because you just see people's best parts for the most part, and you see everything that's fun that's going on, and like life is like this, and you really only see like this upper half. And it also creates at the same time kind of this distraction from like your lower parts that like are really important for getting back up to the higher parts. For me, it's like when I can look at everybody else's good stuff that's going on, then I'm not like really experiencing my lows. I'm just escaping them rather than moving through it. Like if I have a bad day, I like get on my phone and I just start like moving through social media, and then kind of get stuck there because it makes me feel good for a second. And then I feel like, oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, rather than just feeling grateful for what I'm already doing and getting off my phone and doing it. One of the things that's been said to me that's really kind of changed my perspective is the phrase, everything is always working out for me. And my grandfather told me that. He's someone who has like a ton of crazy stories, always had a really, really good outlook on everything. And I was like, how do you do what you do? And he was like, it's really simple. Everything is always working out for me. Everything's always working out for you. Every single thing that happens to you, or every single thing that you experience, is happening for you, and it's working out for you to give you more of the things that you want. And he said, just say that to yourself all the time. And I think that has had the biggest impact on me more than anything else. As far as things that I've tried for coping mechanisms, I genuinely feel like there aren't very many things that haven't worked for me, because if something hasn't worked, it's usually given me an idea of like, well, this thing works better for me. I can't remember of anything that like specifically that I've tried that didn't work, because I've done a lot of journaling, started like doing some meditation stuff, exercising a little bit. There were some things that worked more than others, and flower essences was definitely one of the things that worked kind of more than others, because it not only got me more in touch with like what was going on inwardly and recognizing, you know, why I was afraid of certain things and redirecting my focus to positive things. When using like the flower essences, sometimes like I would get like a strange like thought that would cross my mind, like, oh, you know what sounds really nice? Writing something or singing something. And so I started writing, making music, putting myself out there, and taking an acting class. I started having more of a desire to do things that I wanted to do. And I can't really explain where that came from, other than I think the flower essence and looking for those things. I definitely like experimented a little bit with marijuana, and that helps in a certain kind of way. Like I feel like that definitely exposes me to like really become aware of when I'm anxious, because when I'm anxious I feel really anxious, and like kind of forces me to be like, okay, we're gonna deal with this. Like right now you feel anxious, there's no way out of it, like you gotta just calm down. I think playing with marijuana definitely has brought a lot of like tools into my tool belt from like having those experiences and feeling like, oh wow, I remember what I did once when I was like way too high and got really nervous and was able to calm myself down, like breathe. And there are a lot of other plants like Tulsi basil, or holy basil, it's also known as, and lemon balm, and there are a lot of other plants that are anxiolytic, or they decrease anxiety. I've experimented with a lot of other plants as well. I think flower essences, more than other plants, really speak to me because they're really like spiritual medicines more than anything else, and the spiritual realm and things that we can't quite see or touch are really interesting to me. So working with something that affects me on a spiritual level, I feel like is really powerful, because a lot of the times that also manifests physically and mentally as well. To spread positive awareness on the topic of mental health in general would just be that everybody's mental health like looks different, and there's no right way to feel, and you're gonna have bad times, you're gonna have really bad times sometimes, and that's okay. And there are a lot of tools to help. And sometimes they might be tools that you may have no idea like even exist. And as long as you try stuff out and just find things that make you feel happy and have fun, like the more and more things that you start to find that help are just gonna start like falling in your lap and piling on and changing things. I think the most motivational thing I can speak to when it comes to anxiety and depression is just that you're already doing great. You're here, you're breathing. That's pretty fucking cool. And everything depends on your perspective. Like, I think so many things depend upon perspective. I think that we give power to certain thoughts, and it's really easy to give thoughts that we're afraid of power. And then if you refocus on the things that you want and you really feel like you have them, I think we create that experience. And as long as we focus on what we want and chase it, rather than giving power to the things that scare us, that you know, anybody can do anything that they want. I think if I were to give myself any advice as my younger self, would just be to take it easy. And that everything's changing all the time, and that's okay. And that you can't control every situation, but the fact that you can't control every situation is what makes life beautiful and interesting. And just to go with it, and the only responsibility you have is to figure out what makes you happy and keep doing it. I don't know, I think if there's anybody that's watching this and they feel kind of hopeless, I've felt very hopeless as well. And I guess I just want to tell them that they've got it. And they're doing great. Way better than they probably realize. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you, Emmy, so much.